Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. Guerrilla fighter Stjepan Filipović shouts, "Death to fascism, freedom to the people," moments before his execution in Valjevo on May 22, 1942. He became an icon of anti-fascist resistance in the Balkans. Child survivors of Auschwitz, recently liberated by the Red Army in January 1945. The camp, operational from 1940 to 1945, was the site of the extermination of over 1.1 million people. The liberation exposed the horrors of the Holocaust to the world. After the sinking of the German battleship Bismarck on May 27, 1941, the HMS Dorsetshire rescued only 110 of its 2,091 crew members. The Bismarck was the largest Nazi warship sunk during World War II. The 82nd Airborne Division is seen in action during Operation Market Garden, which began on September 17, 1944. It was the largest airborne operation of the war, involving 34,600 men, aiming to capture strategic bridges in the Netherlands. Prisoners stand for roll call in Buchenwald concentration camp, Germany, around 1943. The camp held about 250,000 inmates, subject to forced labor and medical experiments. Approximately 56,000 died there. Jews are forced onto trains to concentration camps under Nazi supervision around 1941. Over 1.3 million were deported to Auschwitz alone. The trains often carried up to 1,000 people in cramped, unsanitary conditions. A formation of Luftwaffe bombers is shown in 1939. Aircraft like the Junkers Ju-52 were crucial for blitzkrieg attacks early in the war, transporting troops and supplies for rapid invasions. George Blind, a member of the French resistance, smiles as a German firing squad prepares a mock execution in 1944 to force him to reveal information. He did not comply and was later sent to a concentration camp, where he died. A liberated Buchenwald prisoner, visibly emaciated, drinks from a metal bowl in April 1945. The explosion of the American ship Robert Rowan occurred on July 11, 1943, after being hit by a German bomber near the coast of Gela, Sicily. Despite the destruction, the crew successfully evacuated. The Night Witches of the Soviet 508th Night Bomber Regiment were all female pilots who completed over 23,000 missions in World War II. They flew simple planes without radar, stealthily bombing German forces at night. An 18-year-old Russian prisoner is photographed shortly after the liberation of Dachau concentration camp by American forces on April 29, 1945. Dachau, the first Nazi camp, held over 200,000 prisoners throughout the war. August Landmesser stands out for refusing to give the Nazi salute in 1936, defying Hitler's regime. Expelled from the party for marrying a Jewish woman, he was imprisoned and died in 1944 in a penal battalion. His wife, Irma Eckler, died in Auschwitz. Russian boys pose with captured weapons after the Battle of Stalingrad in 1943. They hold Kar-98K rifles and MG-34 machine guns abandoned by defeated German soldiers. A Japanese plane is shot down while attempting to attack the USS Kitkun Bay near the Mariana Islands in June 1944 during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, due to the massive destruction of enemy aircraft. The explosion of a depth charge is captured as the Coast Guard cutter Spencer protects convoys in the Atlantic from Nazi submarines on April 17, 1943. This action was vital in the Battle of the Atlantic during World War II. Explosions over Paris, France in December 1943 during a bombing raid by US B-17 Flying Fortresses. Targets included a ball bearing factory and the Hispano-Suiza engine repair depot, weakening Nazi logistics. 3 children sit among the rubble of a neighborhood in East London, left homeless during the Battle of Britain in September 1940. The German Blitz devastated residential areas, leaving thousands without shelter. Destroyed U.S. vehicles are scattered across the black sands of Iwo Jima in March 1945. The battle lasted 36 days, with 21,000 Japanese defenders and only about 200 captured alive. It was one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War. 2 U.S. Marines used flamethrowers to attack Japanese positions on Iwo Jima on March 4, 1945, as they advanced. The battle secured a vital strategic base for the Allies in the Pacific. A mushroom cloud rises to 60,000 feet over Nagasaki, Japan, after the second atomic bomb was dropped on August 9, 1945. The attack killed approximately 70,000 people, hastening Japan's surrender and marking the end of World War II. An Avro Lancaster of the RAF's 514th Squadron flies over an oil depot in Bec-d'Ambas, France, during a raid on August 4, 1944. These strategic bombings aim to disrupt German fuel supplies. In London on July 30, 1944, a firefighter rescues Barbara James from the rubble after German bombings. The city was targeted by V-1 flying bombs, long-range weapons used by the Nazis during the Battle of Britain. Artillery soldiers of the Soviet Second Belarusian Front operate during the 1944 offensive. This campaign, part of Operation Bagration, destroyed Germany's Army Group Center, liberated much of Belarus, and accelerated the Soviet advance toward Berlin. A Soviet soldier guards a German prisoner after the Battle of Stalingrad, which ended in February 1943. The Nazi defeat, with over 90,000 soldiers captured, marked the start of the German retreat on the Eastern Front and changed the war's course. On December 13, 1943, German forces executed between 693 and 752 civilians and burned over 1,000 homes in Kalavrita, Greece. The massacre was retaliation for partisan attacks and remains one of the worst war crimes of the Nazi occupation. Heinrich Himmler, leader of the SS and Gestapo, inspects a prisoner camp in the Soviet Union in August 1941. Millions of Soviet prisoners perished in Nazi captivity due to starvation, forced labor, and systematic executions. Ludmila Pavlichenko, known as Lady Death, was a Soviet sniper with 309 confirmed kills during World War II. She fought in battles like Odessa and Sevastopol, becoming one of the greatest sharpshooters in history. 2 teenage girls assemble PPD-40 submachine guns during the Siege of Leningrad in 1943. The Nazi blockade lasted 872 days, causing severe food shortages. Civilians, including children, were mobilized to support the war effort in weapons factories. A massive depot of American Sherman tanks is stacked in a scrapyard in Hamburg after the end of World War II. Many of these tanks, essential in the conflict, were discarded due to demilitarization and surplus. The Japanese battleship Yamato is struck by a bomb near its 18.1-inch gun turret in the Sibuyan Sea on October 24, 1944. While the Yamato survived, its sister ship Musashi was sunk the same day during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. A RAF Lancaster bomber flies over Hamburg, Germany, amidst heavy anti-aircraft fire during Operation Gomorrah in July 1943. The city suffered massive bombings, resulting in over 42,000 deaths. A Japanese plane is shot down while attacking the USS Kitakun Bay during the Battle of the Marianas in June 1944. Known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the battle saw U.S. pilots easily destroy 315 enemy aircraft. An American serviceman feeds Japanese children in Okinawa in 1945. After the battle, which caused over 200,000 deaths, civilians faced extreme hunger. Many soldiers shared their rations with the local population amid the devastation. RAF bombers attacked German warships in Heligoland in December 1939. This North Sea island was a key target for Britain early in the war after the invasion of Poland. A man holds up a rope used for hangings at Buchenwald concentration camp shortly after its liberation by American forces in April 1945. The site contained torture instruments used to intimidate and punish prisoners. A Soviet peasant woman raises her fist in defiance as German prisoners march under Soviet custody in 1944. An American amphibious flamethrower tank ignites a Japanese bunker as Marines advance on Peleliu in September 1944. The battle, part of the Pacific Campaign, cost over 10,000 American and 13,000 Japanese lives in fierce combat. Workers dig air raid shelters in Stockport near Manchester. The underground shelters were designed to withstand bombings, providing protection for up to 6,500 people in interconnected tunnel networks. Sailors aboard the HMS Iron Duke, a Royal Navy dreadnought, prepare its guns in 1939. Originally a World War I battleship, it was repurposed as an anti-aircraft defense ship during World War II. Brazilian soldiers of the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, FEB, interact with Italian civilians in Massa Rosa, September 1944. The FEB was vital in liberating several Italian cities and was the only South American army to fight in Europe during World War II. Japanese soldiers march with flags in a military celebration after the Nanjing Massacre, which lasted 6 weeks in 1937, resulting in the deaths of approximately 300,000 civilians and Chinese prisoners, along with widely condemned atrocities. The wreck of the USS Arizona Burning is captured in this image after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on December 7, 1941. The explosion killed 1,107 crew members, marking the United States entry into World War II. Jews are escorted by German soldiers during the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto, Poland, in 1943. The uprising resulted in thousands of deaths, while survivors were sent to extermination camps. The ghetto was reduced to rubble. German troops march into Prague during the invasion of Czechoslovakia on March 15, 1939. The occupation ended the country's independence. Prague Castle became the Nazi headquarters in the region. Crosses mark the graves of German Fallschirmjäger paratroopers killed during the Battle of Crete in 1941. It was the first airborne invasion in history, but resulted in heavy German losses. A British soldier kneels in prayer at Westminster Cathedral in London on June 14, 1940, the day Paris fell to the Nazis. This period marked the beginning of the Battle of Britain. A Japanese kamikaze hits the deck of the USS Saratoga on February 21, 1945. The attack heavily damaged the carrier, part of a tactic where Japanese pilots sacrificed their lives to inflict maximum damage on Allied forces. Soldiers pose on the gigantic German railway gun Schwerer Gustav, captured after World War II. Weighing 2.98 million pounds, it fired shells weighing up to 15,132 pounds over 30 miles and was used in the siege of Sevastopol in 1942. German soldiers advanced into the Soviet Union in 1941 during Operation Barbarossa. This invasion, the largest in history, involved 3 million soldiers and marked the start of a brutal war on the Eastern Front, facing fierce resistance and the harsh Russian winter. U.S. infantry advances among smoldering ruins in Waldenburg, Germany on April 16, 1945. The town was devastated in the final battles of the war as Allied troops pressed for the total surrender of Nazi forces weeks later. U.S. Marines drink coffee aboard the USS Arthur Middleton after 2 days of intense fighting on Eniwetok Atoll in the Marshall Islands on February 19, 1944. The battle was crucial for securing Allied air bases in the Pacific and weakening Japanese control. Soviet troops advance in Prokhorovka during the Battle of Kursk in July 1943. This was the largest tank battle in history, marking a decisive German defeat on the Eastern Front. The engagement involved over 6,000 tanks. On August 1, 1943, a B-24 flies over the Ploiești oil refinery in Romania after the Operation Tidal Wave attack. The raid aimed to cripple German fuel supplies and was one of the most dangerous missions of the war, with 53 aircraft lost. American soldiers aboard a landing craft head toward Omaha Beach on D-Day, June 6, 1944. Around 34,000 troops landed under heavy fire. Over 2,000 were killed on this beach alone. Higgins boats were essential for the invasion. Ground crews prepare bombs for the B-24D Liberator Eager Beaver of the 328th Squadron in Alconbury, England. These aircraft participated in missions like Operation Tidal Wave, targeting oil refineries in Ploiești, Romania, in 1943. In 1943, California-based U.S. soldiers trained for chemical attacks with rifles and gas masks. A medic dog, equipped with supplies, represents the animals used for rescue and transport in combat zones. On June 6, 1944, American soldiers wearing life vests and helmets prepared to storm Normandy's beaches. During D-Day, over 156,000 Allied troops landed in France. In July 1941, in Helwan, Egypt, soldiers of the Maori Battalion performed a haka for the King of Greece. They were nicknamed the 25th German Army by enemies due to their relentless determination in combat. British troops land near Algiers, Algeria, during Operation Torch in November 1942. This was the Allies' first major offensive against the Axis powers in the West, paving the way for the liberation of North Africa and weakening Vichy forces. Dutch soldiers of the 16th Infantry Regiment train on ice skates during the frozen floods of the Grebbe Line near Aschat in the winter of 1939-40. The flooding aimed to delay German invasions, but was overcome in 1940. Polish soldiers of the 2nd Polish Corps operate a mortar near Pesaro, Italy, on August 26, 1944. Part of the exiled forces after Poland's invasion, they fought bravely in the Italian campaign, including at Monte Cassino. Exhausted Panzer Grenadiers rest on a tank after the Battle of Prokhorovka in 1943, part of the largest armored clash in history during Kursk. This battle marked the decline of German offensive superiority on the Eastern Front. A jeep crosses destroyed streets in Valognes, France, with the ruins of Saint-Malo Church in the background in June 1944. The city suffered heavy bombing after D-Day during efforts to expel German forces from Normandy. American soldiers smoke cigarettes while resting behind a Sherman tank among the rubble of Geich, Germany in December 1944. A wounded soldier receives a blood plasma transfusion from a medic on August 9, 1943, in Sicily, Italy. The image illustrates the intense battle during the Allied invasion, which paved the way for Italy's liberation from Nazi fascist control. A helmet atop a rifle marks the spot where an American soldier fell on the coast of Normandy in June 1944. This tribute highlights the human cost of D-Day, when the Allies faced intense German fire to liberate occupied France. A Cromwell tank leads a British column of the 7th Armored Division after landing on D-Day in Vers-sur-Mer, France, on June 6, 1944. Cromwell tanks were crucial for their speed and mobility, advancing to liberate Normandy. Two Soviet soldiers operate communications on a street in Berlin in 1945, with the phrase, "Berlin remains German," in the background. The Battle of Berlin marked the Nazi collapse, with the Soviets encircling the city and securing surrender on May 2nd of that year. Crowds celebrate the arrival of Soviet soldiers in Lovech, Bulgaria, on October 15, 1944. The Soviet occupation marked the end of the pro-Nazi regime in the country and the beginning of communist influence, transforming Bulgaria into a Soviet ally. An American soldier inspects looted Nazi art stored in a church in Ellingen, Germany, on April 24, 1945. The art was part of the Nazis' vast cultural plunder, much of which was recovered by the Monuments Men unit. A French woman offers cider to a British soldier armed with a Bren gun in Lisieux, France, in 1944. After D-Day, acts like this symbolized local gratitude for the liberation of Normandy by Allied forces. African-American Marines pose on Iwo Jima, highlighting the vital role of segregated troops in World War II. Despite discrimination, their bravery helped pave the way for military desegregation in 1948 under President Truman. Soviet soldiers fight in the streets of Stalingrad in November 1942. The battle, one of the war's most brutal, lasted 5 months and caused an estimated 2 million deaths, including civilians, marking a decisive turning point on the Eastern Front. A U.S. Army medic provides first aid to a soldier near Tittingen, Germany, during the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. Despite heavy losses, the Allies held firm, marking the beginning of the Nazi forces' collapse. Moscow residents listen on June 22, 1941, to the Soviet government's announcement of the Nazi invasion, marking the start of Operation Barbarossa. The offensive was the largest of the war, involving 3 million German soldiers. American soldiers distribute candy to Dutch children on November 2, 1944. The gesture occurred after the liberation of the Netherlands, a critical campaign to isolate Nazi forces. Soviet prisoners freed by the 117th Regiment of the U.S. 30th Infantry Division on April 6, 1945, peel potatoes at an improvised camp. Around 3.3 million Soviet prisoners died in Nazi camps. American soldiers operate a 75mm M1A1 howitzer in Bougainville, Papua New Guinea, in December 1943, defending the Torokina airfield. This portable artillery could be transported by mules or light vehicles in rough terrain. Soldiers of the U.S. 7th Armored Division search for snipers in the devastated streets of St. Vith, Luxembourg on January 23, 1945, following the Battle of the Bulge. The town was a site of intense combat. Alexei Yeremenko, a political commissar of the Red Army, leads soldiers against German positions in Ukraine on July 12, 1942. Minutes after this photo, he was killed. Commissars motivated troops and ensured political loyalty. German soldiers advanced through a burning Soviet village during the first months of Operation Barbarossa, June 1941. The Nazi campaign aimed to quickly conquer the USSR, but faced fierce resistance. Soviet troops march in the Revolution Parade in Moscow on November 7, 1941, with German forces only 18 miles away. After the parade, soldiers headed straight to the front. Stalin declared, "The enemy is not as strong as some frightened intellectuals think." American soldiers of the 7th Armored Division teach football to British troops of the 15th Scottish Infantry Division in Summeren, Netherlands on November 2, 1944. American soldiers gaze at the Bavarian Alps through the ruins of the Berghof, Hitler's retreat in Berchtesgaden in 1945. The site, targeted by Allied bombings, was looted during the final advance against the Nazi regime. German troops advanced through the dunes of the Egyptian desert under the strong Ghibli wind in September 1942 during the Battle of El Alamein. This confrontation marked the beginning of the decline of Rommel's Afrika Korps, facing a decisive Allied counterattack. A Red Army soldier guards a downed Polish PWS-26 aircraft near Rivne in Soviet-occupied Poland on September 18, 1939. Infantry soldiers move past the post office toward the walled city of Intramuros in Manila on February 23, 1945. The Battle of Manila involved intense urban combat, leaving over 100,000 civilians dead. A monument of Mussolini erected in Adwa, Ethiopia in 1936 symbolized Italian occupation. Standing for 5 years, it was demolished in 1941 by British and Ethiopian troops, marking the nation's independence. In the freezing Hurtgen forest near the Belgium-Germany border in 1944, 3 American soldiers prepare for combat. The battle, one of the longest of the war, caused over 33,000 Allied casualties. The iconic image of a sailor kissing a nurse in Times Square marked VJ Day on August 14, 1945, celebrating Japan's surrender. U.S. Marines advanced through the wreckage of Tarawa in November 1943. Part of Operation Galvanic, the battle cost 1,000 American and 4,500 Japanese lives in just 76 hours. The ruins of Smolensk, USSR, reflect the destruction caused during Operation Smolensk in 1943, when the Red Army reclaimed the city after 2 years of Nazi occupation. U.S. Marines raised the American flag on Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima, on February 23, 1945. The iconic image symbolizes U.S. victory in the Pacific. The battle resulted in 26,000 American and 18,000 Japanese casualties. Children wait in Ipswich, Suffolk, for evacuees arriving from London in December 1939. During Operation Pied Piper, around 1.5 million people were relocated to the English countryside. St. Lo, known as the capital of ruins, was devastated during Allied bombings in July 1944, before and after D-Day. About 95% of the city was destroyed, leaving only a few buildings standing. The devastated interior of the Catholic Hospital of the Transfiguration in Warsaw's suburbs, following Nazi bombings in September 1939. The hospital, treating civilian and military casualties, faced constant attacks during the Polish invasion. Russian civilians evacuate their destroyed homes during the siege of Leningrad, which lasted 872 days. The city endured starvation and extreme cold, resulting in the deaths of approximately 1 million people. Nazi troops advanced through rural Poland during the invasion in 1939. The Wehrmacht combined cavalry, motorized vehicles, and light artillery to support the Blitzkrieg strategy, allowing them to occupy the country in just 5 weeks. A German nurse adjusts a gas mask on a child in September 1937. Gas masks were common in Nazi Germany, prepared for chemical attacks feared after World War I. Artwork from London's National Gallery was moved to secret locations during the Blitz. Most pieces were hidden in Manad Quarry, Wales, to protect them from the bombings that devastated the city. A resident of Dreux, France, removes a Nazi poster after the city's liberation by American troops on August 20, 1944. During the occupation, propaganda like this was used to impose Nazi ideology and control the local population. American soldiers inspect the Hochwald West Fortress, part of the Maginot Line, in 1944. Built by France to deter Germany, the line cost billions of francs, but was bypassed in 1940, proving the ineffectiveness of static defenses. U.S. soldiers fight German forces near Cologne Cathedral in April 1945. The battle marked the Reich's final days, with Cologne in ruins after heavy bombing. The city was liberated shortly after this engagement. Soldiers of the U.S. 94th Infantry Division patrol a snowy forest near the Siegfried Line during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. The severe conditions tested their endurance in one of the war's decisive confrontations. A massive pile of German Stahlhelm helmets is gathered after Germany's surrender in 1945. These steel helmets, designed for maximum protection, were often melted down for repurposing. On September 12, 1944, the USS Queenfish rescued British and Australian prisoners from the Rakuyo Maru, a Japanese ship carrying 1,317 POWs. Only 159 survived the attack and harsh conditions. Young Polish scouts from the Radosław Regiment fought bravely during the Warsaw Uprising in September 1944. Despite lasting just 63 days, they resisted Nazi forces in pursuit of liberation. All in this photo survived the war. 2 women observed the rubble of the asylum they once called home, destroyed by a German bombing in Newbury, England, on February 11, 1943. Soviet soldiers advanced during the Siege of Leningrad on January 1, 1943. The battle, lasting 872 days, was one of the most brutal in history, causing starvation and devastation. Damaged religious statues remain among the ruins of Nagasaki on September 24, 1945, 6 weeks after the city was devastated by the atomic bomb. Amid the Battle of the Bulge, American soldiers pose with Belgian children in the winter of 1944. This moment of humanity contrasts with the Nazis' last major offensive, fought under harsh weather and intense combat. British prisoners of war leave Hong Kong for a Japanese prison camp in December 1941, following the surrender of the territory to Japanese forces. 2 British anti-aircraft gunners build a snowman equipped with a German helmet and a pipe near a 40mm Bofors gun in Italy on January 6, 1945. Armed with a Sten Manke III submachine gun, this British soldier of the 3rd Division sits in a trench near Helmond, Netherlands on December 31, 1944. The Sten, cheap and effective, was crucial after Operation Market Garden. Amphibious tanks of the Red Army cross a river in 1941. These tanks, essential on the Eastern Front, excelled in flooded terrain, enduring harsh Soviet conditions. U.S. infantry soldiers of the 22nd Infantry Regiment, 4th Infantry Division, marched through the devastated streets of Prüm, Germany on March 1, 1945. The city, strategic in the Siegfried Line, was key to the Allies' advance into Nazi Germany.